Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. I wanted to talk about veterans that may be misled by the way the VA expresses certain benefits. What happens is the VA will throw out certain words and certain ideas. There's certain pieces of legislation, and what happens is we hear it and we think that that might be the only avenue in which we can obtain a specific benefit. I'm going to dive into it a little bit here, give my thoughts on it, and really that's what this video is going to be about. So please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. Every single minute watched helps push this information into the hands of our brothers and sisters. Please hit that thumbs up, doesn't cost a nickel. If you want to support the channel in other ways, consider being a member. Thank you so much to all you members. I truly appreciate every single one of you. It really does mean the world to me and the channel, your memberships. I do my best to get back to you in the comments. Thanks so much. All right, so let's jump into this. Specifically, what am I talking about? Well, I mean, there could be several different avenues here, but the one that really bothers me is the way that the VA words certain things and expresses certain things with regard to disability compensation. Now, I'm going to give a couple light examples, and then I'm going to move into a deeper one that could cost you thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, potentially millions of dollars over your lifetime. And the first ones I'm just going to mention are just kind of some deterrents, right? So VA disability, right? Oftentimes when you hear the word disability, you do not associate things like arthritis or migraines or sinusitis or heartburn, right? GERD. You know, you don't associate those with disability. You think of physical disabilities, loss of use of a limb, loss of a limb, that type of stuff. So that's a deterrent for folks looking to potentially file a claim with the VA, but then they realize, oh, it's disabilities, and I don't really have any quote unquote disabilities. I can stand up, I can walk to the bathroom, I can walk back. I don't really think I would rate for that. Another one is the way that the VA talks about the 100% schedule for ratings, and 100% being the maximum because it's 100%, makes you believe that there's nothing beyond that, which means that 100% would then be reserved for the most severe circumstances for our brothers and sisters, right? Those, that should be something that's reserved for somebody, who is in the most dire situation. But that's not true, because there's SMC, special monthly compensation, in which the most dire situations compensate our brothers and sisters. The 0 through 100% rating schedule is kind of what I call the everybody rating schedule. Now, that's just a couple quick examples of some of the little things that bother me with the VA, but here's the big one. Presumptive lists, and I love presumptives, by the way. Presumptives are great because they eliminate the need for the nexus, but here's the problem. Many of you who are watching this video, you already probably get it. But remember, we only represent 3 out of 10 veterans because the other 7 have never filed a claim. Why? Because they self-segregate out, because they think, oh, it has to be a physical disability, or they think that the military had to cause the condition, which is also not true. And they can also be looking at presumptives and going, well, I don't meet any of those. So then they self-segregate out because they aren't on a presumptive list. So presumptives are great, but what happens is, at least in my opinion and what I've seen, is, for example, let's use the PACT Act. PACT Act was great, passed through a bunch of different presumptive conditions, which is fine. But now, if you served in any of those locations, you may think those are the only conditions in which you could file for. Because it sounds like, well, here's the conditions you can file for if you served in this area during this time, during this period, and whatever, right? Potential exposure to X, Y, or Z. here is your presumptive list of conditions, and oh, if you meet one of these criteria and you have that condition, then you're good to go. But if you didn't quite serve in that time frame, or you don't have a diagnosed condition that's on that list, well, sorry. Maybe you just have to wait until there's actually your condition listed on the presumptive list, or you have to wait until they expand the dates or time frames or locations for the presumptives. So that absolutely makes veterans out there, our brothers and sisters, go, well, I can't really file for anything because I don't have a condition that's on there. I have a different condition, or I didn't serve there in that right time frame. And that is not true. You can still file a claim. It's just that it's not going to be a presumptive claim. And so I think that the bottom line here is that the VA needs to do a better job of expressing you have two options. You can file a presumptive claim. Actually, you have three options at the end of the day. You can file for a presumptive claim. You can file for a traditional claim, it's just a standard claim where you have to prove the nexus, or you can file a claim for a secondary. That's kind of your three areas for connection within the VA. Now, yes, I get it. Presumptive is great. If you understand all of it, you understand presumptives are great because they eliminate the need for the nexus, okay? So what happens if you don't meet the criteria for a presumptive condition? Well, now you got to move over to a standard claim, okay? Now, what does that entail? Well, let's talk about it. What you need for a successful claim is time and service, so you got to prove that you were in the military from here to there. Great. Then, what are you going to do that with? Your DD-214, right? So that's done. Now, you need a diagnosis, right? You need to have a condition for the VA to rate you for. So you need to go get diagnosed. Your condition must be chronic in nature or have some sort of residual kind of effects to it. It needs to be an ongoing problem. Now that you have those first two things, your time and service documented and your diagnosed condition, the third thing you need for a successful claim to get connected with the VA is what they call a nexus, okay? The nexus is the VA saying, prove to us, the VA, that your condition either A, manifested during your time in service, or is a result of your time in service, okay? So your time in service, your DD-214, gives you that window of opportunity, right? Then you need to somehow take that diagnosed condition, even if it was diagnosed 10 years after service, 30 years after service, doesn't matter, right? Let's use migraines for an example. I love to use migraines as the example because it is a condition that you can kind of just treat yourself. You don't need a diagnosis to figure out that you have migraines. You know you have migraines. And what do? Take Excedrin, take a bunch of Motrin, take some Motrin and some aspirin, take some Tylenol, whatever, right? And you knock it out. And, you kind of sit in the corner and you hum until it finally starts to dissipate a little bit to where you can function again. So you may have done that for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years after your time in service, continued pushing on, just dealing with it yourself. And that would be a very normal thing to do, right? You just suck it up and deal with it. I mean, what else are you going to do? So you probably didn't document it during your time in service. You may not have any records in your time in service, but this type of a condition is a condition that makes sense, that you would have dealt with it on your own, right? You would have taken Motrin from your medic or your corpsman. You would have bought some from the store. You would have self-treated with over-the-counter medication and moved on. So now, later on in life, you get that diagnosis, and now you have that, and now you got to work on that nexus. So how do you work on that nexus? How do you prove that they manifested during your time in service if you don't have anything in your records? Well, you can get a Nexus letter from your doctor, right? The doctor's going to say that your migraines are at least as likely as not to have occurred or manifested during your time in service. You can write a letter explaining that you had just self-medicated, a very normal thing to do. Everybody that you ever knew just said take some Motrin, right? So why am I going to go to the doctor and spend, $200 to a doctor to end up getting a diagnosis for something that I already know that I have, to be given the same thing that I already take, is the mentality, right? So it makes sense that you didn't get diagnosed for 10 years, 30 years, whatever it is. If you know anybody that you served with, they could write buddy statements. If you have a family member that knew you, obviously, when you before you joined, during your time, and after, well, hey, they can attest to, never complained of migraines before, and then during, that one time that they came home on leave, they sat down at the dinner table with a jar of Motrin, right? And they could write a letter basically attesting to it. So that's just a version. Now, what I'm going to tell you here is whatever your condition is, if it's not a presumptive and you believe it had to do with your time in service, research different things. Research your MOS in correlation to that condition. Research different ships that you were on, different bases that you were at that had any sort of problems, associated with, bad drinking water, for example, or maybe it was a test site, maybe there was asbestos, right? Many of you that are watching this were surrounded by asbestos and lead paint and that type of stuff, whether it was in barracks or on ships or whatever. So look at the places you served, the type of job you did, were you around a bunch of jet fuel, were you sniffing that all day long? And look to see what sort of conditions that type of atmosphere could have on you. See if there was any sort of reports, anything regarding the areas or the ships that you were on, and find that. If you can find any studies regarding certain things, any of that type of stuff helps to prove that your condition manifested during or as a result of your time in service. This is going to be really important because that can be supplied as evidence, and it can be used by your doctor to help write that Nexus letter and have some solid footing for rationale. Now, why is this important? Because your claim goes through an adjudication process and can be appealed at basically a court level by a judge, by a veterans judge, right? Veterans law judge. And you look at this through the lens of kind of a legal process. And the one thing that's really different about this legal process of filing for your VA disability compensation is that the burden of proof is not, without a shadow of a doubt. That is not how the VA works. The VA works with the idea of if we're not quite sure, we're supposed to rule in your favor. In fact, it's essentially if the evidence is in equipoise, meaning that it's equal on both sides for and against you, the VA is by law supposed to rule in your favor. Now, do they get it right all the time? No, they don't. And that's okay, because you can appeal it, or you can put it in for a higher level review, or put in for a review with additional evidence as a supplemental claim, or you could submit it to the board and have a veterans law judge look at it. And the last time I looked at the numbers, it was probably 8 months ago or so, the number of claims that the board of Veterans Appeals gets, the veterans law judges, of those, they approve around 30%. So that's pretty good odds. If you had 30% chance of winning the lottery, you could bet you would be paying. So don't be afraid to push it to the board when needed. If evidence is in equipoise, they're supposed to rule in your favor. So with that, just wanted to shed a little light, and don't be discouraged if you don't have a presumptive condition to work with, or you don't meet the time frames for a specific presumptive condition. Work with what you got. Research, look around, look for studies, based on your MOS, based on different exposures. Maybe you were a fuel person, right? So you're dealing with jet fuel or whatever. Maybe you were on a ship that was riddled with asbestos, right? Any of those types of things can be proof for you in your favor that can help you get your service connection. So with that, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you so very much. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.